Give me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is good to see you again today. Welcome to the quarterfinals of the International Reparation Debate Competition 2025. Yes, you heard right, the quarterfinals. The teams that you are going to see debate over the next 2 days stand at the pinnacle of this competition. These are your top 8 institutions. That means that they would have fought and won 2 rounds of matches so far, or they would have been the wild card, maybe not winning their matches, but performing so well that they were invited back into the competition. Either way, ladies and gentlemen, these are your top 8 teams. Glenmuir High School, St. Joseph's Convent, Montego Bay High School, Clarendon College, Holy Childhood High School, Queen's College, Hampton School, and Arima North Secondary. These schools make up a cross-section of Caribbean countries from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. Today, for the first match in the quarterfinals, we see 2 teams from Jamaica vying to secure their spot, going just a little bit further into the semi-finals of this competition. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for returning so that we can witness these wonderful, wonderful debates. I am Ravon Thomas Matthews, and I will be serving as your chair judge for this particular match. With me are some other very important people. They'll be serving as my wing judges. I want to introduce to you firstly, Miss Calicia Vassell.
Good morning, everybody. I am Calicia T. Vassell. I'll be serving as a wing adjudicator for today's match. Good luck to both teams. I'm looking forward to an exciting exchange.
And of course, not to be outdone, Miss Dejanae Fagan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dejanae Fagan, and I'm also serving as a wing adjudicator for this match. I look forward to being amazed.
And I'm looking forward to being amazed as well, Dejanae. Of course, being here in the quarterfinals at this stage of the competition would not have been possible without some key partners and sponsors. And I want to take the opportunity right now to tell them thank you. So I want to thank firstly the University of the West Indies, CARICOM, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, the Center for Reparations Research, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, the Repair Campaign, the PJ Patterson Institute for Africa, Caribbean, Public Advocacy, and the University of Hull. We've been having a wonderful time over these past 3 rounds, and it would not have been possible without these very important people, partners, and sponsors. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hinted at it earlier. Of these 2 top 8 institutions, 2 will be vying to secure that coveted semi-final slot. And perhaps going all the way to the grand finals of this competition to be crowned the champion of this international debate competition. The two teams vying for that first semi-final slot today are the Montego Bay High School for Girls, coming out of Jamaica, and Clarendon College, also from Jamaica. At this point in time, I want to hear a little bit more about our expert debaters. And we want to start with the proposition team, Montego Bay High School. Please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. My name is Rihanna Barker, and I'm the first speaker of the Montego Bay High School debate team.
I am Michaela Brown, and I am the second speaker.
My name is Vanessa Clayton, and I am.
Thank you very much, Montego Bay High School for Girls. And the opponents, Clarendon College from opposition. We invite you to introduce yourselves.
Good morning. My name is Shanika Willis, the first speaker from Clarendon College.
Good morning. My name is Alia McKenzie, second speaker of Team Clarendon College.
All right, thank you very much, Clarendon College. The motion before us today reads, this House believes that reparations should be determined through community-based decision-making rather than government action. Once more, this House believes that reparations should be determined through community-based decision-making rather than government action. At this point in time, I know and you know the rules of the competition. But just in case you're tuning in for the very first time, let's have a refresher. The first speaker from each team will speak for 7 minutes. The second speaker will be allotted 6 minutes. And the third and final speaker from each team will be provided with 5 minutes to present their substantives. The first and last minute of each speech is what we call protected time. What are you protected from? Points of information. So within that first and last minute of your speech, no points of information will be allowed. Outside of the first and last minute, points of information are not only allowed, they're absolutely encouraged. And as always, in between rounds of speakers, we have that always electrifying period of cross-examination. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the cross-examination period when we get there. But ladies and gentlemen, you've heard enough from me. You want to hear from the debaters. You want to hear from these two teams who stand at the top 8. And with that, we now kick off this very first debate in the quarterfinals by inviting the first speaker from Montego Bay High School for Girls to open this debate.
Can I begin?
Ready when you are ready.
Thanks. Mr. Speaker, honorable judges, and my opponents, a pleasant morning to you all. It was within the scenic boundaries of a Kong town, a Jamaican Maroon territory, that I personally heard stories of resistance passed down by direct descendants of the enslaved. I learned how Dottie Bookman, Taki, and countless others waged wars both in Jamaica and Haiti, sparking fires of rebellion that would eventually burn into the Haitian Revolution. Here lies real stories of small communities of the bold, the strong, and the brave that led to large-scale resistance. And now, in the modern age, we are fighting an obvious debate. Who must make decisions for reparations? Surely the communities, the people, the descendants of the enslaved. Governments didn't save us. We saved ourselves. Today, the proposition resoundingly agrees with the mood. This House believes that reparations should be determined through community-based decision-making rather than government action. If it isn't just by mere morals or justice, it should be out of logic. Reparation is justice for the past, yes, but what is justice if detached and frayed at the edges? Justice is defined by what it has repaired. No repair equals no justice. I want to set the definitions of 4 terms in this debate. Reparations in this context are structured systemic initiatives to restore broken societies, i.e. communities, affected communities, that have aimed to addressing the enduring injustices of slavery and colonialism. A community refers to the collective of individuals directly impacted by past injustices. In terms of reparations, communities tied by racial, ethnic, or indigenous groups like Maroons, Rastafarians, Tainos descendants. 3, community-based decision-making. It is a decentralized process where affected communities collectively define and direct how reparations should be approached, while government action is the direct opposite, where Caribbean governments seek to define and seek reparations from a top to bottom executive order. I make my argument based on these two grounds. One, letting affected communities decide how reparations are designed and used is in itself a form of justice. And two, government action is slow, bureaucratic, and a one-size-fits-all approach as opposed to tailored to each specific community. The proposition believes that justice must be tailored, not templated. My second speaker will reiterate the fact that we are not absolving the government from reparations process altogether. The proposition wants the communities to design and define what reparations are needed for true justice to come about, so then the governments can act as funders and facilitators rather than dictators. My third will summarize our points. Now, according to the CRC website, as it pertains to repatriation as a form of reparation, a resettlement program should address such matters as citizenship and deploy available best practices in respect of community reintegration. How will we facilitate resettlement programs if we do not pursue active communication with the people who we want to ship back? Here's what the proposition proposes. An amalgamation of electives from communities can be made for a formal discussion. Maroon chiefs, indigenous group leaders, local cultural organization leaders, and trace direct descendants to have an open discussion about what their community is lacking today as a direct result of the transatlantic slave trade. When you really think about it, this is actually saving the government from filling holes that were never holes to begin with. For example, formulating a repatriation program for, say, about 100,000 people, but only 25,000 are willing and ready to go back to Africa. Waste of resources. Opposition, you must see logic. Communities understand their own needs. They know exactly what was robbed and what they need repaid. In the United States, the city of Evanston in Illinois implemented a housing reparations program designed with input from Black residents. It was tailored, transparent, and targeted, and stands as a model for what real community empowerment can look like. The CRC 10-point plan asks for the return of cultural heritage. Return to who? To which community? Who can claim the rights for these artifacts and knowledge that have been locked away in colonial institutions? The communities in which they were robbed from. Without community-engaged decision-making, there is no justice, because what is owed to the victims of the slave trade is not repaid until the cultural heritage is restored from where it is from. Let the people decide, because it was theirs. It was their ancestors that carved deities and symbols of hope, and their ancestors that wrote stories of their lives before they were written over by colonizers. This is what reparations is. This is more than financial compensation. It is a return of cultural heritage as well. The modern descendants have a right to their cultural heritage and knowledge of their great-great-grandparents. Here's a successful example. The Morio community of New Zealand presented their claims to New Zealand's Treaty of Waitangi settlement framework, leading to negotiations with the Crown, not accepted at this time. In 2019, a deed of settlement was signed, including a formal Crown apology, financial compensation of 18 million New Zealand dollars, and the transfer of culturally significant lands. The community asked, decided, and received. Let us adopt this principle in the Caribbean. Allow me to remind us all here of what government action actually is. For example, in Jamaica, we beg and we demand for better roads. We want roads, we want justice. The government, with its ever so not accepted at this time. The government, with its ever so slow saving grace, patches a few holes and calls it a day, perpetuating the cycle of potholes, patch, bad roads, pothole, patch, and so continues. We beg and we plead for better jobs for young people. The ever slow saving grace of the government hosts massive recruitment fairs and campaigns, but still the public cries out. There's been no callbacks, there's been no follow-ups, there's still no jobs. We ask for housing. The government gives us housing solutions worth $19 million for a one-bedroom. Do you see a common thread here? Slow, inefficient, ineffective, and not actually listening to what the public wants? Why should we subject reparations to the same fate? For example, when there's a need for reparations of land rights for Maroons in the hills, and it conflicts with foreign investment in mining, what do you think governments will do? The morally good? No, we know this because we see it happen time and time and again. If reparations take the same fate, it will be utterly and demeaningly watered down to fit foreign policies and allegiances. Allegiances to colonizers. Our political system is still deeply entrenched in colonial systems. This is why the government cannot speak for us. The communities must speak for themselves. What justice is it if we wait hand and foot on the white master while they pacify our governments and silence affected communities? In 2021, Germany officially pledged 1.1 billion euros over 30 years of reconstruction and development projects to indigenous communities in Namibia because of crimes of genocide. Representatives of these communities contended that they felt excluded from the negotiation process. One unnamed chief was quoted as saying, "What is being offered is too little, to an insult to our community, and totally different from what we agreed. That is the reality of government action. What is justice if not full and due amendment?" The Bible in Isaiah 1 verse 17 says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow." Well, Mr. Speaker, we are the widow. Death to our bridegroom, that is our culture, our heritage, our home, and our very sense of belonging. Seek justice for the ancestors whipped to death in the fields for speaking in their tongue. Seek justice for their descendants can know the stories of adventurers, healers, and rulers. Community-based decision-making is best for effective reparation because it is justice for the descendants of the enslaved. I thank you.
And thank you very much for that first speech from the first speaker from Montego Bay High School for Girls, Rihanna Barker. At this point in time, the first speaker from Clarendon College, Shannon Willis, to open the debate for that side of the house.
Are you hearing me?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. All protocols observed. The opposition stands resolute against the motion. This House believes that reparation should be determined through community-based development decision-making rather than the government. We stand for the definition posited by the government, with the exception of the word government action. Government action is a centralized process where democratically elected institutions, parliamentary ministries and courts create, implement, and enforce operation. The burdens. Proposition must prove that community-led operation result in more just, effective, and inclusive outcomes rather than government-led processes. They must show that communities are better decision makers and that state involvement is either unnecessary or harmful. Opposition must prove that government-led operation, especially with community consultation, are more legitimate, scalable, and enforceable than purely community-driven efforts or counter policy. We stand for a centralized government-led reparation system where financial decision-making authority entirely with the state. However, the process is designed to be informed by structured consultation. That means that governments will gather evidence, hold public hearings, and include advisory panels composed of community representatives. But the state retains all legal, financial, and implementation powers. Government will be held accountable through curriculum reparation. This is the hybrid actor. It is a unilateral government action that happens to be informed by community perspectives. This is not a compromise model. It is a stronger version of state-led action, which makes it better within the comparative. The status quo. Reparations today are often fragmented, underfunded, or absent altogether, largely due to political hesitation, lack of public consensus, and bureaucratic delay. However, despite its flaws, the state is still the only actor with the legal authority, coercive power, and financial capability to implement operations at scale and with a lasting enforcement. Community-based decision-making is currently grappling with inefficiency, lack of expertise, high potential for community disagreements regarding priorities and resource allocation, which stalls decision-making and creates division and inconsistent outcomes. We oppose this motion because it risks replacing flawed but fixable systems with ones that are unstructured, fragmented, and unenforceable. Now let's rebut. The government is not a one-size-fits-all as the government has stated. It holds local branches which addresses local social operations. The government has given free houses to less fortunate in numerous instances. Even though it is not a lot, they have still been taking effect to basically aid the less fortunate. While the government might be so, it is guaranteed that they will take time to do reparations carefully and to ensure that it is effective. In today's debate, I will bring two arguments. One, government action ensures scale, consistency, and enforcement. Community mechanisms simply cannot. Two, community-led operations risk worsening inequality and division within marginalized groups. My first substantive is government-led operations are more likely to be implemented at scale with consistency across regions and enforceable remedies, whereas community-led systems lack the resources, legitimacy, and structure to deliver meaningful justice. The first warrant is governments have the legal and financial infrastructure to act at scale. Only states possess the ability to generate and allocate large-scale funding, pass legislation, and enforce rulings. For instance, Canadian government allocated $1.9 billion in compensation to Indigenous residential school survivors through a legally binding settlement agreement, something only possible through national legislation and judicial oversight. My second warrant is community models lead to fragmentation and inconsistency. Decentralized reparation efforts often produce unequal outcomes across different communities without a central actor to coordinate outcomes will depend on the political capital or resources of individual groups. This creates internal resentment and a postcode lottery of justice. We saw this in South Africa, where divergent reparation demands had to be mediated by the government to ensure national consistency. My third warrant is only governments can compel compliance and ensure justice is delivered. Private actors and institutions often resist reparation efforts. Governments are uniquely positioned to mandate action through taxation legislations or courts. Even in Jamaica, examples like the misuse of funds by some community development committees show that while CBD is promising, it is vulnerable to favoritism, elite capture, and lack of transparency without strong accountability systems. According to the Gleaner, some leaders were accused of favoritism in Jamaica, like Clarendon. This resulted in the Social Development Commission stepping in to retrain leaders about transparency and hold public elections to try to reduce corruption. Without state enforcement, reparations remain voluntary and are often symbolic, not substantive. The impact, it ensures that reparation efforts are consistent and not determined by community wealth or influence. It prevents fragmented or tokenistic justice by embedding enforcement into national system, and it also provides long-term legitimacy and follow-through institutional capacity. My second substantive is leaving reparations to community-level decision-making amplifies power imbalances within marginalized groups and risk excluding vulnerable voices. My first warrant is communities are not homogeneous and are often reflect internal power hierarchies. Within marginalized group, decision-making is often dominated by a few, whether due to gender, class, or generational dynamics. In several U.S. tribal contexts, for example, elder males leaders have historically monopolized discussions around land compensation, sidelining women, youth, and lower-income members of the group. The government has failed to tackle that. Warrant 2, lack of transparency and accountability enables exploitation. Unlike governments, communities lack formal oversight, bodies, transparency regulations, or anti-corruption safeguards. In Nigeria's oil-producing Niger Delta, local leaders tasked with distributing reparative payments engage with misappropriation and nepotism, fueling community conflict rather than reconciliation. Warrant 3, it shifts the burden of justice onto victims themselves, expecting harmed communities to design, fund, and enforce reparations with no state support imposes an unjust expectation. Many lack the administrative expertise or stability to undertake such a massive task. This replicates the injustice of historical neglect by placing the onus of healing on those already harmed. The impact, it reinforces internal divisions and excludes marginalized voices within affected community, Mr. Speaker. It also undermines trust and cohesion by enabling elite capture and corruption. And thirdly, it places undue pressure on vulnerable groups to deliver justice that should be the state's responsibility. Mr. Speaker, we cannot sit here and allow the government to misguide us by stating that CBMs are capable of doing reparation, because firstly, they have not given us a policy as to how they plan to do that, because community-based decision-making are not fully constructed, they are not tried, and if they're supposed to do reparations right now or determine reparations right now, it will be a trial and error. Mr. Speaker, while the government might have us in the frying pan, using CBM will take us out of that frying pan and put us into the fire. And that is why we, the opposition, believes that reparation should not be determined through community-based decision-making, but through the government. And for now, the opposition momentarily rests.
And thank you very much for that opening substantive, Shanna K. Willis from Clarendon College. Ladies and gentlemen, I promised you something exciting and electrifying, and the teams are going to present it and provide it for you. I'm talking about, of course, the cross-examination period. And so we will invite, firstly, Clarendon College to pose questions to Team Montego Bay High School for girls. Each question will last no more than 10 seconds, and only one member from the team may ask a question at any given point in time. The answer to these questions, you are provided 30 seconds to give me a robust and strong answer. And to ensure that that answer is indeed strong and robust, the entire team can pitch in to supplement those answers as long as it falls within that 30-second remit. Clarendon College will ask 3 questions, Montego Bay High School, you will answer those 3 questions. The time starts when you present your first question, Team Clarendon College.
How can you guarantee that decisions made by individual communities will not jeopardize the national interest of countries as a whole?
We didn't hear. We're not hearing you. Please come closer.
How can you guarantee that decisions made by individual communities does not jeopardize national interest of the countries as a whole?
The proposition is arguing for community-based decision-making because, everything okay? The proposition is arguing for community-based decision-making because we want the interest of the communities, the affected communities, to be at heart.
Further, there is diversity in thought. We wholeheartedly want there to be both proposition and opposition. All communities should be able to have a say, and all thoughts should be considered equally.
When the needs of communities are met, national needs are met as well.
Communities are microcosms.
All right, thank you. And your next question, Clarendon.
How do you prevent the repercussion of CDM addressing reparation from a social perspective rather than a non-prejudiced one, ostracizing communities that doesn't have the resources?
Community-based decision-making is for the community. It does not ostracize any community because we're giving them the right to speak, so their needs can be heard and decisions can be made, circulated on their needs.
And that is every need: social need, economic need, political need. No need should be excluded.
And of course, Clarendon College, your final question.
Can you explain the effectiveness of external bodies in monitoring the numerous CBMs at different levels?
Can you clarify what is CBM?
Can you explain the effectiveness of external bodies in monitoring the numerous community-based decision-making groups that will be there at different levels?
All right, so within my speech, I highlighted what the proposition is wanting for. It's a combination of forum of indigenous groups. So indigenous group leaders, Maroon chiefs, local cultural organization leaders, these coming together, having an open discussion with mediation and knowing that there is what is at stake. There are people speaking on different sides, and that open communication will lead to a more prosperous and successful reparations because communities are getting the chance to voice what they want, and then this can be met with reason and logic rather than governments dictating what they must get, and because that is filling holes that might not even be there.
And that is inequitable.
Yes, that is inequitable and unjust. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for that first half of the cross-examination. At this point in time, we invite Montego Bay High School for Girls to pose questions to Team Clarendon College.
Okay. If reparations are meant to address harm done to the people, then why should the state, not the people, get the first say in defining what justice looks like?
All right, so we have literally stated this in our policy that the government will host public hearings and they will do consultants through their local governments to ensure that people's voices are heard. So we're not saying that we're not going to listen to the concerns of the people. However, we're saying that the government is the most suitable candidate here to basically address the concerns of reparation and ensure that all the needs of reparation are met in a just way, because community-based decisions are prone to more corruption than the government. Yes, corruption is in the government, but more is prone in CDMs. So we're saying that the government is the best candidate as they have the resources, they have the framework. While we understand that there are loopholes, they they can be fixed. But most community-based management or whatever they are, they don't have the qualified infrastructure to do that. So, and they will still have to go to the government if they have some sort of legal issues, which will require some sort of government intervention. So it's best that we just use what we have now, the government, because they are suitable.
Will secondary input from MPs be better than the primary data that can be inputted from communities?
Could you repeat that question?
You mentioned MPs being able to draw in information from communities, but I'm asking, how will secondary input from MPs be better than the primary voices of our communities? Primary data.
All right, so first and foremost, if the information is supposed to be sent to another party, it will still be secondary information, because they will still have to consult with the same people that the community authorities are still going to consult with. The law is just that the difference is the MPs are doing it. So, and the MPs will be able to bring back the message back to the government, because they will listen to the concerns and the queries and address them, because they have the financial capability, they have the social capability, and they have the legal framework to address any issues that they have within reparation. Additionally, they have to give account for every dollar that is spent in reparation as well. So that would basically ensure that reparation is done properly, and it is done keenly and effectively, and not just from the concerns of a social standpoint, but from a just and equitable standpoint.
Okay. If reparations are to correct a history of silencing and exclusion, how can your model sufficiently justify doing the same today without community inclusion? Without allowing communities to speak first?
So we have already stated in our policy that there will be community consultations. However, only the state has the financial and the legal frameworks to implement reparation at the large scale that is required for it to be implemented now.
So we're not saying that the people are not going to have a say, but what we're saying is that we're not going to allow them to determine how reparations are used, because the reality is, if favorism is supposed to be there, it is going to be through CDM, because they are prone to what? Sexual, gender, wealth status, and all of those stuff. While the government know they have access to all of the resources to navigate and reduce the likelihood of any sort of favoritism or prejudiceness in reparation.
But the power is not what is being argued, is it? It is how the decisions are made.
All right. All right. A little bit of a snarky back answer there. But as you both know, the cross-examination period has ended. Thank you, both teams. Ladies and gentlemen, the teams did not disappoint. We particularly enjoyed that. Right. Now, to extend the case for team proposition, we now invite Michaela Brown from Montego Bay High School for Girls.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished adjudicators, esteemed opponents, good morning. This debate is not the absence of government, it is the realignment of power. Correcting our premature institutions require the mothers and fathers of our communities and the young. I, the second speaker, will speak to the overriding benefits of community decision-making as opposed to government action, but I must first rebut a claim. Opposition says that communities may lack the resources, the power structure, or legal authority, but this is exactly what we are saying, that the government should support and not replace community action or community decision making. They should not merely dictate. Communities should have a say. They also say something about unequal representation, but I ask you to ask any marginalized constituency about what the government has done or their contribution to marginalization. I digress. How can you have action without consideration of all stakeholders? Why should government act without the input of their people? We do not deny the government has the role, nor do we expel their capacity to act. But the stance is this: It must start with us. According to the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, reparations must involve the full and effective participation of victims to meet international human rights standards. Further, Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a more general means that speaks to exactly this, that all humans should have the right. That is the right of people. To deny communities a voice in reparations is to deny a universal right of people, especially the very people who have suffered from generational harm. It was the community-driven South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, established after apartheid, that successfully contributed to the healing of a nation, with grassroots testimonies playing a crucial role in the healing process. Government is capable of watering the tree, but not tending to the roots. Not accepted at this moment. And reparations without community involvement is just that, surface level, disconnected and inequitable without community say. And let us speak a little bit more on that tone of equity. Community decision-making is inclusive and it is representative. Community doesn't just mean where you live. According to Oxford, it is who you are, what you believe, and what you share with others. This includes Rastafarians, Maroons, a group of experts under the field of reparations form a community. The group of civil servants that facilitate government action form a community. Surely opposition does not believe that these communities can be left out or excluded from decisions about reparations. Not even government themselves believe that when their power relies on us. Reparations without inclusive community participation is not reparations. It is a directive from the top, a control akin to that of our former colonial political systems. Opposition might say that communities are divided. Which communities exactly? The unified Rastafarians? Okay, let us say that there is the case of division. So is Parliament, yet we don't dissolve it. Diversity of thought is a strength, not a flaw. No one is going to have the same view, but they should all be considered. And that is equity through community action. Even greater, communities know their needs best. Local communities are closer to the impact of colonial harm and are best placed to decide. They know what they need. Your community may suffer from digital divide, yet the government erects a $12 million welcome sign, as akin to the situation in Negril, where 12 million was spent on a Negril sign that sparked national debate, with citizens stating that the funds could have addressed school and internet access instead. This is the disconnect that we speak to. This is inequitable, and does not correct the needs of a community. This is the disconnect, a directive from the top with no consideration of communities. Not accepted at this moment. Opposition may also say that government is more organized, but what is organization without relevancy? Opposition may pose the point that some communities may not want to be involved in the process, but that does not give the right to silence all. Of salience, sociology, ecology, and philosophy defines communities as microcosms, which means that they mirror the broader nation. They are where culture lives, where oppression is felt, and where progress is made. If reparations work at the community level, then they can scale to national transformation. Equity begins locally. According to the Caribbean Development Bank, community-driven initiatives in the Caribbean yield higher satisfaction and sustainability rates than top-down government programs. Opposition may say once again that community lacks structure, but the solution is not exclusion. They must support communities so that they can facilitate their voice, so that they can speak. And then when you say that they lack structure, you completely neglect the option or the presence of community associations and combined groups. What we are doing right now, opposition, is community decision-making. Community decision-making is already working. The fact that opposing views are being voiced right here means that we are shaping a collective solution, which is exactly what reparations need. And we can refer back to South Africa. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission depended on over 21,000 community testimonies, which historians credit with restoring dignity and laying the groundwork for national healing, promoting amnesty, reparation, and restitution through community drive. Reparations aren't just about money, they're about restoring broken trust, creating dignity, and healing wounds. My opposition, my adjudicators, I ask you to picture this. Your community sidelined, you and your neighbor ignored after generations of injustice. The moment of restoration comes and you have no say. This debate is not about the absence of government. This is the realignment of power, and it starts with us. I thank you.
And thank you very much to the first speaker, rather the second speaker from Montego Bay High School for Girls, Michaela Brown. Now, similarly, we invite the second speaker from Team Clarendon College, Alea Mackenzie.
All protocols observed, good morning. Before I present my substantive, allow me to highlight inconsistencies in the proposition stance. The proposition constantly argues that we aim for a one-size-fits-all. However, we have stated in our policy before that community members will consult with the government and the final decision making will lie with the government. Additionally, they stated that how Maroons or Rastafarians are actively involved in their reparations. However, it is important to note that they also consult with the government, and particularly Minister Bobsy Green, Oliver Bobsy Green rather, consults and works hand in hand with the Rastafarians and makes the final decision in order for them to get what they want as it relates to reparations. You also stated that the government wasted money in putting up a Negril sign. However, that was money from tourism, which was regenerated again to attract tourists, and it is not competent with the motion. I now present my substantive. I present my government guarantee accountability while CDMs alone do not. Toward my substantive, Mr. Speaker, governments have a legal obligation to see to it that the public is informed of their actions and its progress as it relates to reparation or any matter in fact. In addition to the separation of powers and public scrutiny, the opposition as well as independent bodies such as anti-corruption agencies and ombudsman keep the government in check. Mr. Speaker, it is also easier for international bodies such as the Caribbean Reparations Commission to get involved with keeping the government in check through annual or biannual audits. There are no such mechanisms in CDMs to ensure that transparency, and this can be seen, for example, with the Providence Rhode Island Reparations Initiative, where the city attempted community-driven reparations program focused on racial injustice. However, concerns arose about the lack of clear financial commitments and the difficulty in ensuring long-term accountability. And there was even an appeal for the government to become more involved in making the final decisions for their process. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, if there are some measures in place for community leaders to be held accountable, it will have to be taken to the law. And the judiciary is a branch of the government, which means that CDM would require heavy government intervention at some crucial points in the process where concerns and accountability are raised. My second point, Mr. Speaker, is that CDM leaders may simply represent the most trusted or religious people within a community, which are far older often and are often more traditional. Not only does this undermine the evolving changes in the needs and priorities of the younger generation, but this also causes community members to view them from a solely moral standpoint, leaving them to be less strict with their regulatory and enforcement measures. On the other hand, the government at any point in time is not conventionally viewed as such. And on the contrary, they are always pressured by public opinion, and the public do not have a morally binding reason to exempt them from question. My third warrant, Mr. Speaker, is that community members will be burdened with the task of finding resources to ensure that the process of reparations and enforcement to foster accountability, and this will take a long time for these mechanisms to be effectively implemented, whereas the governments already have the resources, already have the policies policies implemented and the scalability required, as we previously mentioned, to ensure reparations are targeted towards each person affected by colonial wrongdoings. We should care about this, Mr. Speaker, because if there are no clear measures to keep community leaders in check, this leads to uneven distribution or allocation of funds or implementation of reparation compensation. Mr. Speaker, the beneficiaries of reparations risk being exploited, robbed of their entitlement, while their supposed leaders can avoid responsibility for their actions as they are not strong enough regulatory and enforcement measures. I now move on to my second substantive. Community-based decisions cause a lack of unity among individuals as well as different communities. My first warrant, Mr. Speaker, is that individual members of a community, though they have a common aim for reparations, they may have different reasons for wanting reparations. For example, in historical context, we have seen that though communities of humanitarians and industrialists had the common aim of abolition of slavery, but for different reasons. And some members were only content where certain steps or part of the process was achieved before they decided their goal was accomplished, and leaving the other members of the organizations with the burdens to carry on alone. Similarly, with communities, there are different people who want to achieve different goals as it relates to reparations and in different forms, being cultural, community, economic development, or simply symbolic gestures. Once their objectives are satisfied, they step out of the movement, leaving with all their contributions, as they have no legal obligation to stay in an organization if what they want is achieved. Mr. Speaker, as my opposition leader has already highlighted, the government is one centralized body that clearly identifies the goal, highlights reasons, and regardless of how far they are in the process or whether an individual goal is achieved, each person has a legal obligation to stick to the goal because it is their duty. To further warrant my substantive, Mr. Speaker, with CDMs, smaller communities are more at a disadvantage than larger developed communities. This is because underdeveloped communities lack the resources to lobby for their interests, while larger communities secure their interests and leave the rest, if there's any left, for smaller communities. This can also lead to increased competition between communities who want their interests to be met at the expense of others. To conclude my final argument, the impact of this, Mr. Speaker, is that we risk a disorganized society that only looks out for their own interests instead of the country as a whole. People will no longer be concerned with the matter of reparations, even if their fellow citizens or own communities members are dissatisfied with their progress as it relates to reparations, if their own objectives have been met. The opposition rests for now. Thank you.
And thank you very much to the second opposition speaker. What a heated debate. Yes, quite an impactful one. At this point in time, we're going to heat it up a little bit more by entering into the second period of cross-examination. Clarendon College, the floor is yours to pose your first question.
Okay, our first question. How do you address the fact that many communities lack the resources required for rigid regulatory and enforcement measures as it relates to accountability?
This was mentioned in our speech, and the solution is whether it remains that it should start with community, and that government should supplement them rather than to exclude them from the process.
Governments are supposed to act as funders and facilitators rather than dictatorship. That is what we're fighting for. We're not fighting for how exactly it will be implemented. We're fighting for how the decisions will be made. That is the most of this debate. Who makes the decision? The communities made the decision because they know what they want, they know what was robbed, and they know what their communities need to be repaired with.
Okay. If the opposition, the government deputy leader rather stated that the government is going to support or contribute to reparation, but isn't that government's action to have a say in what reparations are being used for?
No, not hearing you clearly. Could you repeat, please?
I think I heard the question at the bottom. Please repeat.
If the government is supporting or contributing to reparation, isn't that government's action to have a say in what reparations are being used for, what reparations are determined for?
No, that is government giving communities, facilitating communities with the power that they have to have, for communities to have the say in the decision making. They should not be excluded.
What the proposition proposes is a forum, an open discussion of leaders, maroon leaders, ethnic leaders, indigenous leaders, to have a conversation about what they want so they can come to this and that, hey, we want reparations to form an apology, in form of repatriation, in form of this, in form of that. So then it can be met with those needs. Governments cannot just dictate that, hey, we're getting money from England, so we're going to give you money to go back to Africa. What if I don't want to go back to Africa and I'm in a marginalized group? That is what community-based decision making is. That is the meaning, the definition.
Time elapsed for that answer. Thank you. Your next question, Clarendon College.
You mentioned the Maroons, but didn't the leaders of the Maroons still consult with Olivia Babs-Green to make the final decision? And doesn't this prove that the government is the only feasible institution right now that can basically implement effective reparations?
No, it only
No.
proved that the conversation started with community, and that is
Exactly.
exactly what we're fighting for. That this is not the absence of government, it is the realignment of power, and that it should start with communities. And that is, thank you for that
We
example.
do not want government to water down the demands. When the Maroon chief went to Olivia Babs-Green and said, this is what my community needs, it mustn't be watered down by government action. That is what we're fighting for today. That is the definition we propose in my speech, what community-based decision-making is.
Chief Corey went to Olivia with community decision, community-driven action. And that is what
That
we're
was
fighting for.
discussed and decided and brought forward.
All right. Thank you very much for that first half of the cross-examination period. We now flip 180 degrees and invite the Montego Bay High School for Girls to pose questions to Clarendon College.
So reparations aren't just financial. It also deals with land rights and cultural heritage. When government interests conflict with reparations, what frameworks can you put in place to ensure communities aren't marginalized or silenced?
So the government takes the interest of the whole country, takes the interest of everybody in the country as a whole, which means that we, as we stated in our policy, we'll have community consultations. But the thing is, the final decision making will lie with the government and not the communities themselves.
And we remember that the government has branches, and these branches will ensure that the local consent of the community is addressed, and that they are highlighted, and that they are addressed. And the government will do this in a just way. But if it is done through CDMs, however, it is more likely that it is prone to corruption. It is more likely you so care about, because we have gender, we have wealth, you have status, you have different perspectives or moral laws, you have religion, which will justify or change the prejudice or the idea of what reparation is supposed to be used for.
So you're saying one size fits all. Let me tell you that is not justice. And that leads into my next question. What specific evidence do you have that community-based decision-making have worsened inequalities, as you have said in your speech? And how did government correct that?
Repeat the question.
All right, so what specific evidence do you have that community-based decision-making has worsened inequalities, as you have said in your speech, and how did government fix that? Specific, with names and countries.
All right, so first and foremost, we've seen that in Jamaica, as I've stated in my speech, particularly in my second substantive, where I was talking about Jamaica, we're receiving current in parishes like Clarendon, St. Thomas, and Hanover, where they were trying to do community development commissions through, even though it was not through reparation, but it was a still community-based decision-making process. So we see where they were not trained, and it caused a lot of social contention, and the government had to intervene with the Social Development Commission to ensure that these people are trained, and they still had to hold an election to ensure that these people are trained or they have the characteristics to basically even have a group. So this is evidence that the community-based development decisions are not ready, they are not equipped, they are not trained enough to do reparations right now, because the government is already implemented. And while it is flawed, we created a policy for it to ensure that these flaws are fixed. The loopholes in the government are already highlighted, and we have developed a strategy to fix this through the CARICOM reparation and through all of the government institution that will oversee them and hold them up.
Let me tell you that our country is not filled with illiterate and innumerate people. So this leads into our next question.
Didn't the example that you just made is an example of how government understands the need for communities to start the conversation by training them? The example that you just gave of governments training communities so that they could be better equipped, isn't that an example of governments understanding or seeing the need for communities to start the conversation?
Facilitating it.
And your answer, Clarendon?
Okay, that is not an example of the government seeing the need for the communities to start the decisions. That is simply an example of the government intervening because they realized that the marginalized groups were ignored in the community and they feared disorder if they were supposed to completely take over alone.
And mind you, in these same parishes, these same literate people that you are talking about, they were still not able to basically implement a strong community decision-making system in Jamaica, and the government still had to intervene. This shows that even if they are literate, they still need some sort of training from the government.
Jamaicans are literate and educated.
And that is the end of cross-examination. Order in the debate. Thank you very much to both teams for what has been so far a treat of a quarterfinals match. At this point in time, we will pause the debate for exactly 1 minute to allow the finishing touches to be placed on those reply speeches, after which we will invite the opposition reply speaker. And your 1 minute starts now. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been your final minute of preparation for this debate. Now, to conclude this debate, for the team opposition, we invite Akelia Hones from Team Clarendon College.
I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Honorable House, my most worthy opponents, a pleasant morning. Mr. Speaker, let me point out that the proposition is clearly misguided and fundamentally flawed. My opponents, you need to go back to the drawing board. Now permit me to try to raise the motion as we engage in a debate and in the pursuit of truth. This House believes that reparation should be determined through community-based decision-making rather than government actions. Permit me to highlight the clashes in the debate. Firstly, community-based decisions will give these communities a form of justice mentioned by the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opposition would like to acknowledge this, however, this is fundamentally flawed on the opposition side of the House because they have failed to address the fact that power dynamics may cause biased decision-making or deter the decision-making process. My opposition leader has already proven this. Mr. Speaker, biased decision-making can significantly impact community-based decision-making for operations, potentially lead to unfair outcomes and erosion of trust. This is because personal opinions, prejudice, or interest can influence decision-making process, compromising
enhancing the fairness and effectiveness of decision making. Mr. Speaker, the proposition mentioned that there's a diversity in thoughts to consider equality, or if decision making is biased. How do you ensure this? Decision makers may give more weight to information that aligns with their interests or biases and be more critical of information that challenges them. Additionally, they may filter out information that is not relevant to their interests or biases, or that challenges their pre-existing opinions, ultimately leading to incomplete or inaccurate information being used to make decisions. The provision is clearly blinded, Mr. Speaker. They fail to address the fact that the resources are limited within these community-based decisions. Mr. Speaker, limited resources suggest that community-based decision-making for operations may be hindered by insufficient resources, including financial constraints, human resource limitations, and infrastructure and technological limitations. The provision fails to understand that this is manifesting inadequate funding, limited budgets, lack of expertise, insufficient capacity, inadequate infrastructure, and limited access to technology, ultimately hindering the effectiveness and efficiency of community-based decision-making for operations and making it challenging to achieve fair and equitable outcomes. Mr. Speaker, the proposition clearly misinterprets the motion because they continue to mention that we cannot exclude the committee from the operations process. Mr. Speaker, it seems as if the proposition does not know what the word determine means. So permit me to define it for you. Determine, my opponents, means to set or decide by an assertive or conclusive decision. Mr. Speaker, we have proven in our policy that we will still consult the community to have their ideas and document them, hence we will not exclude the community. The argument is that we are not allowing these community-based decisions to have the final say. The proposition mentions that Jamaicans are literate and educated. We do agree, Mr. Speaker. However, the government still offers strength and support to these individuals because they're incapable of controlling the process by themselves. The opposition side argues that government actions are slow, bureaucratic, and the corrupted government cannot be trusted. Mr. Speaker, the opposition likes to highlight that while it is true the government decision-making can be we identify the government decision-making can be so bureaucratic. This does not necessarily mean that community-based decision is the solution. In fact, community-based initiatives can also be plagued by inefficiencies and delays, particularly if they lack the necessary resources and expertise or infrastructure to effectively manage the process, as my opposition leader would have already mentioned. Furthermore, government involvement can provide a level of accountability and transparency that may be lacking in community-based initiatives, which can be beneficial in the distribution of persons, rather than pitting community-based decision-making against government actions. Mr. Speaker, the effective approach is to allow operational distribution to be done through government action. Additionally, if the position is well concerned about corruption, Mr. Speaker, there are systems in place to hold government accountable, as our policy would have already outlined. Mr. Speaker, accountability mechanisms can ensure transparency and accountability in government spending. This can be achieved through independent audit agencies and public oversight. Regular audits can identify potential issues which encourage reporting of suspicious activities. Public oversight bodies can monitor government spending, providing an additional layer of accountability. Mr. Speaker, with these measures, we will ensure transparency in the government and the operations process. Mr. Speaker, we win this debate because we have proven that, one, allowing the government to determine the operations process would foster transparency and equality within communities as the proposition fails to address these inequalities. Number two, we have proven that the government, unlike communities, have access to resources. The proposition has not shown us how they will source funds to undergo this process. Thus leaving this to the government, the only logical decision. And with that, Mr. Speaker, the opposition stands resolute against the motion that this House police operation should be determined through community-based decisions, making rather than government actions, and the opposition rests. Thank you.
And thank you very much for concluding the debate for side opposition. Now, to bring this debate home, we invite the final speaker from Montego Bay High School for Girls, Vanessa Clayton.
At this point, I must ask, what exactly is your stance on the moot? Because if we're being honest, it feels like you've lost track of the original motion. This debate is about whether reparation should be led by the government or by the community. Yet time and time again, you've strayed into discussions about the government's financial capacity and its role in implementation, issues we've already agreed on. So let's get back on track, shall we? Do you truly believe the government should lead the conversation, or are you arguing for its involvement in the process? Let's make this crystal clear. From the start, this isn't an attack on the government. No, this is about who should lead the conversation on reparations. It's about handing the power to those who have actually lived through the pain, who carry the scars of colonialism, and who understand justice better than anyone. Reparations aren't for the government to dictate. They're for the people, by the people, and only the people who have suffered can truly define what justice looks like. Yes, the government has a role to facilitate reparations, but let's stop pretending like facilitating means dominating. Communities are the ones who need to decide what reparations should look like, not bureaucrats, not faceless officials. It's about rejecting government. It's not about rejecting government involvement. It's about giving the oppressed the power to define their future. Now let's deal with the opposition, shall we? Their second speaker, they agree with us, but they're too clueless to even realize it. They talk about the government needing to be involved, but that's not what is at stake here. We agree. The government should absolutely be involved because they got the resources to implement what the people want. But here's the kicker. We're not debating about government participation. We're debating who leads the process. Communities must be the ones to set the agenda, to define reparations, to determine their justice. End of story. And now let's expose the opposition's real weakness. They're harping on about the government scale and consistency. Newsflash, scale is just their word for conformity, and consistency is a bureaucratic nightmare. What they don't get is that reparations aren't a one-size-fits-all formula. Each community has its own story, its own needs, its own path to healing. The government can't fit them all into one cookie-cutter mold, no matter how hard they try. Only grassroots movements can capture that nuance. We need the people at the top of the process, not the government imposing a solution from the top down. The opposition keeps clinging to this notion that the government should have the final say in the reparations process. But let's be clear, the final say does not belong to those who are detached from the pain and suffering of the communities. The final say lie with the very people who've been oppressed, who've lived through the effects of colonialism, and who understands their needs better than the bureaucrat ever could. The opposition keeps claiming that community-led approach would be unstructured and fragmented. Let's put this to bed. Grassroots organizations aren't unconstructed. They are the backbone of change. What they miss is that real change doesn't come from the top. It comes from the people. The bottom-up approach has always sparked revolutions. Yeah, that's why we're free, not top-down bureaucracy. Now let's talk about the opposition's tried and worn out argument about inequality. They want you to believe that government control is the key to fairness. How laughable. The government has failed marginalized communities for decades. If they could fix inequality, they would have done so by now. Why are we having this debate? So don't buy into the lie that top-down control guarantees fairness. It's simply a smokescreen for their inability to trust the people who have been through the pain. This debate isn't about whether we trust the government with money. It is about who has the legitimacy to define justice. And the answer is clear. The people, the communities who have suffered the consequence of colonialism know exactly what justice looks like. The opposition wants you to believe that the government can dictate that, but that's just another failed top-down approach. Grassroots movements like those of the Maroons, the Rastafarians, and youth today pushing for change has always led the charge. The proposition wins because we've consistently emphasized the core truth that communities must lead the conversation on reparations, not the government. The opposition's arguments have crumbled under the weight of their own contradictions. They acknowledge, albeit reluctantly, that the government's role is to facilitate, yes, but they mistakenly try to claim it's also about controlling the process. This is where they faltered. Every point they've made about financial capability, scale, and consistency has only validated our stance that the government should not dictate the process, but simply support it. The communities have the legitimacy to determine what reparations should look like because only they know what justice means to them. They fail to address the heart of our argument. Grassroots movements are the ones that push real change. Bottom up. They've tried to exaggerate concerns about fragmentation and equality, but those concerns don't hold water against the strength of the people's will. The government doesn't have the connection, the vision, or the trust to lead the charge. Only the people can define their own healing. And the government's role is to facilitate that vision, not hijack it. The opposition has backed us into a corner where they're simply agreeing with us. And yet, they don't even realize it. We've won because we've shown that true reparations must come from the people, not the state. I thank you.
And thank you very much for concluding this debate. At this point in time, the judges will excuse themselves to deliberate and return to you shortly with the answer and who will be advancing to the semifinals of this competition.
My name is Rena Parker.
My name is Hanessa Clayton, the team captain.
My name is Michaela Brown.
And I am a part of the debate team at the Montego Bay High School for Girls.
Located in Montego Bay, St. James, Jamaica.
Reparations matter to us because history isn't just about something we study.
The impact of colonialism and slavery still exists in modern day society.
This well-established and deserved opportunity is one that is capable of rebuilding my nation.
Jamaica, like so many other nations, still feels the scars of colonialism and slavery.
I'm not the only one who can acknowledge the significance of this means of restitution. Reparations matter to everyone who has that opportunity for impact.
They represent justice for the past and hope for the future.
Reparations represents accountability and justice, and this is why reparations matter.
Reparations are not just about righting the wrongs of the past. They're about securing justice for the future. Let us be the voices that challenge, inspire, and create meaningful change. Choose Montego Bay High.
I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. Good day, everyone. My name is Montego, is the first speaker of this house, and we are here to firmly affirm the mood that Clarendon College should be selected to be a part of the international reparation debate. Now, what is reparation? Reparation is basically compensation for whatever harm has been done to somebody in the past.
Point of information.
Not accepted at this time. It is essential for reconciliation and cohabitation within our society, which is why we firmly believe that Clarendon College should be selected.
Point of
accepted.
Are you aware that this is a debate?
I'm aware, very well. And what are you guys trying to say?
You didn't even allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Akela Horners, the reply speaker of this house.
And I am Ciara Simpson, the second speaker of this house.
I am Shanake Willis, the first speaker of this house.
We have been learning about our history from as young as the age of 7.
As history and law students, we have been learning about reparations for a while, and we believe that this is our opportunity to express what we learn and grow a deeper knowledge as to what reparation is and its significance to society.
And you should consider us to be a part of the international reparations debate.
International Reparation Debate Competition. This International Reparation Debate Competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparation so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional / international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end. It left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the calls for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement. Deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and the children. According to Lucille Mathurin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else."
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lower their enslavers' expectations and reduce suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Chui from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago. 400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what will be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said that's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations, we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight we're returning to Ghana. You may say, I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded in the process of our enslavement. So our enslavement was not just physical, it was not just cultural, it was spiritual, because you took me away from everything. Who then must I look up to? Who then must I emulate? Who then must I kill myself in order to elevate you?
What is common about the wealth? A flag raises high, but the strings still pull from London. We sing our anthems in borrowed tongues, march to the beat of siphons' drums, celebrating a freedom that still pays tribute. Independent? What is that when the governor's shadow still lingers? They tell us, we free. Tell that to the bones at Rapparee. The 196 who fought and won only to drown in chains. Our Negmawan. Do the people of North Devon not hear the howls raging for their home? The tide spits their cries, their names foam in fury, salted by a sea that will not forget. They call us independent, yet a crown still sits above 14 nations, still bent at the knee, still ruled by a throne built from our gold. They took our labor, snatched our names, they welcomed our craft, then cast us adrift. Windrush mothers, fathers, exiled from the empire they built. What is common about the wealth? Our persistent potency that perseveres through acute artistry. We carve language into legacy, turn sorrow into song, drum resistance as rhythm, sink steel into symphony. We are the architects of new worlds, the poets, the painters, the prophets, who make home in remnants still, who forge futures from fractured pasts. They took the wealth, but we are the riches.
And remember that chattel slavery of the African people was also genocide. This is not highlighted sufficiently. If you take my home island of Barbados in the Caribbean, the British brought 600,000 people into Barbados. 600,000 Africans were brought into Barbados. The black population of Barbados today is 280,000. How do you reduce 600,000 to 290,000 after 200 years? They brought 3 million into Jamaica. At the end of the slavery malarkey, there were just about 600,000. The survival rate of African people in the Caribbean was about 17%. It was horrendous.
The Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community.
But I will say to you, therefore, that the issue of reparations for the transatlantic slavery is an issue that we will take up with you, and that the appropriate apology and compensation is paid, and that the international community accepts that this should never happen again.
And yes, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, slavery is a crime against humanity.
concept of reparations would take the question of development repair, and it would be multi-generational. What needs to happen is face-to-face discussions, which we deem as absolutely important, because if you can't see me or hear me, it is not appropriate to be able to make a judgment as to who or what I am and what I should receive.
Progress also means reparatory justice to heal historical wounds and climate justice to secure our future. We must be bold, demand what is owed, and build a Caribbean that thrives.
Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this international reparation debate competition. This international reparation debate competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparation so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional / international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end, it left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the calls for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and children. According to Lucille Matherin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else.
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lowered their enslavers' expectations and reduced suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Twi from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what would be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight, we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said that's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations, we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight, we're returning to Ghana. You may say, I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded.
Ladies and gentlemen, the judges are back. We have deliberated, we have debated, we have had our own little fights, but at the end of it all, we have come to a conclusion. And it is a unanimous decision. All members of the panel have agreed with each other and have determined who will be moving on to the semi-finals of this competition and who will have the privilege of saying we are top 8 in the Caribbean. So Let us go into what happened in the debate. Firstly, the motion. This House believes that reparation should be determined through community-based decision-making rather than government action. Keyword in this motion, determined. Therefore, who has the final say in this particular thing, right? Is it community-based decision that determines reparations, or is it government action that determines reparations? And so what we saw is a convergence of the ideas. Most teams wanted to involve the community in some way. And we think that's fine. We think that it's absolutely fine for both teams to take the stance to want to involve the community in that kind of data analysis at the bare minimum for decision-making processes. The divergence between which the teams stood was now a question of, is that engagement of the community a definitive decision-making one, or is the engagement of the community a data gathering? I understand where you're coming from. I hear you. We'll see what the final decision rests with me. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the delta with which the teams decided to debate. And we thought that's good. We thought that was really good. It was an excellent analysis of it. We wanted to say that, yeah, these are acceptable boundaries in the debate. So the first thing that we wanted to understand is, like I said, what's the role of government? Is the role of government supposed to be one of decision makers or facilitators? Well, Montego Bay High School for Girls says they should be facilitators. They say that one, government is slow, that they can't give a one-size-fits-all solution to the problem, and that this is particularly bad. And so the role of government should be that of a facilitator. Clarendon College disagrees. Clarendon College says the government should be a decision maker because the government has the resources and capacity and wealth of expertise in order to make these decisions, and the community doesn't. Montego Bay High School concedes to that. They say, yeah, government has the money and the capacity, the communities don't. So give it to the communities. Montego Bay High School for Girls says, if it is that you believe that the community doesn't have these capacity, as you say, then absolutely you as government, give it to them, give them the resources, give them the training, give it all to them. And we thought that was brilliant. We thought that was that's brilliant, that's fair, and that's wise. It's not a question of whether or not the community has the resources. We, the judges, then concluded from that particular clash, because even if the community doesn't have the resources, the government does. The government can just give them. It's not a question of if the community has the resources or not. It's a question of, given the resources, is the community the best actor? And we thought that's good. We got that out of the way quick and early, and we moved on from that. So then it came to the question of collective unity versus disaggregation of personal interest. We heard this idea from team proposition that we get a collective unity indeed. Rather, we heard this idea from the opposition that the government knows what's best for the people, and we get that kind of collective unity, and that's good, right? Opposition tells us that no, what we need is each individual telling us exactly what we want, and we saw a particular issue coming on from there, and we call that clash the disaggregation of personal interest. Team Clarendon College tells us one thing amongst many. They tell us that one, the problem with putting the decision in the community is that, well, threefold. One, individuals in the community can have a kind of hippo moment. The louder voices in the community, the authority figures, the elder males, as they characterize this particular individual as, is going to be the one to hold the sway to that particular thing. And then when you do that, that is bad, because then you don't get a true voice from the community. We have these hippos in the community, influences, and we don't necessarily get that in go because there are checks and mechanisms and balances in place to stop this from happening. That's the first contention from Clarendon College. Clarendon College also tells us that within the community, you have those particular individuals leading this way, which is not fair, it's not equitable. But across communities, communities differ in terms of wealth and dynamics and demographics, and that richer communities can influence it, and you don't get as well that true value that we want. We don't get that true value that we want from getting to ensure that we do indeed get community-based decision-making, if it is that that decision-making serves the purpose of hearing the voices of the community. Because one, the individual powerful people in the community will sway the vote. And then two, across communities, the stronger communities will sway the vote. And then we heard as well this other analysis that eventually when people leave, they get their objective from the community-based reparation. Them going about their business. They no longer care, and therefore the individuals who are powerful, who get what it is that they want, they leave. Now, we thought that that was the weak of the three arguments, because here's the question. And proposition asks the question quite clearly. Fine, you have achieved a particular amount of benefits from the social, from the reparations, but we don't get the social, we don't get the cultural. Who cares? I don't know. Because if the community has unilaterally decided that what is of most importance is the money, why should I care that we don't get the cultural, we don't get the social? Government will ensure that I get the cultural and the social, but if the community doesn't care about the cultural and the social, why should government care? In as much as Montego Bay High School says, communities are a microcosm of society. So if the community gets what they want, then everybody gets what they want, and that's fine. So even if people leave after them get the money and them don't get the social apology, them don't get whatever other soft skills they want, who cares? We don't know. And we don't know why the government caring is a particularly greater thing than the community getting what they want and moving on with their lives. And so we're not 100% sure of that. Other ideas that came out in the debate is a question of oversight in the communities. How is it that we ensure that communities are doing what is good, communities are doing what is bad? And then the question of the specificity of the benefit versus the generalization. Ladies and gentlemen, I must say, my OA has been short. I would love to get deep into the arguments and the analysis. So unfortunately, time does not permit. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that after a brilliant quarterfinals match, the judges have concluded that the team that has won this match, and we'll be moving on to the semifinals of the International Reparation Debate Competition, is the team hailing from Jamaica, the opposition team, Clarendon College. Congratulations, Clarendon College. And I must say, valiant fight. Clarendon College now moves on to the semifinals of this inaugural staging of the International Reparation Debate Competition. Clarendon College, you should be very, very proud of yourselves. Team Montego Bay High School, you didn't advance. You are top 8 and you presented a really, really good debate. The scores from this match, befitting a quarterfinals match. Clarendon College ending on 283 points to Montego Bay High School for Girls 277 points. A mere 6-point delta separating the teams. Montego Bay High ending on a really impressive 277 points. Previous rounds, that's debate winning scores. However, the competition is tougher. And so, unfortunately, Montego Bay High School, this is where your journey ends in this competition. The best debater from this match comes to us from the winning team, Clarendon College, and that is the first speaker, Shanna K. Willis from Clarendon College. Wonderful, wonderful setup of the debate. The burdens were clear, the status quo was clear, the presentation and the substantives were clear. We loved it. We loved everything about it. And in fact, I believe, I hope I'm not misquoting myself, he received quite an impressive score, the highest score that Ira Vaughan has ever given in this competition so far. I can't speak about any other judges, but that's the highest score I have given. I was thoroughly, thoroughly impressed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Join us in a few minutes for match 2 of the International Reparations Debate Competition. But just before we go, we want to provide a special honor to our top A schools. Let us hear from you, teams. Clarendon College, let us hear from you. Let us hear from you, Montego Bay High School for Girls. Clarendon College, go right ahead.
We want to extend a big congratulations to Montego Bay High School for Girls for making it to finals of this competition. We must say that this was a very exciting match, and we are grateful for the that you put up.
Yes, we want to utmost
extraordinary. Give a big congratulations to the Clarendon team. You guys did exceptionally well. And I can say for sure that this has been an exciting match for sure. We definitely had a little conflict of thought and resolution to some degree. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Montego Bay High. Thank you very much, Clarendon College. Now, with that said, join us for match 2 in the quarterfinals of this competition, IRD 2025, where we will see the Holy Childhood High School from Jamaica going up against Queen's College in Guyana. The motion, this house would nationalize companies with historical ties to slavery. See you then.